Longevity isn't luck. It's not a supplement stack. It's not even discipline. It's alignment. Welcome to Age with Intention. I'm Aviles, where we explore how people live longer, stay stronger, think clearer, and age with purpose. And today's conversation challenge is something most people don't question anymore. You know that more information, more tracking, more tools will fix you here and there. But what if the problem isn't what you're doing? It's what your body is receiving. So today I'm joined with Zaid. Zaid is great at this. He focuses on circadian alignment, specifically on light, water, and the environment inputs that shape almost every major health outcome. So Zaid, welcome to the show.
Thank you, my friend. Excited for it.
Awesome. So let's start here. What pulled you into this circadian biology? Tell us a little bit about your background.
So started playing competitive soccer at the age of 4 in the U.S., California based more specifically. And I basically spent the next 23 to 25 years trying to pursue a professional contract in the game. Traveled to different countries for it, went to different academies. It's taught me a lot. But the real pivotal experience for me after, the tail end of my quote unquote career with soccer was the fact that my dad had 2 heart attacks within the span of a year. And then that second heart attack induced him into a coma, which then eventually led to his passing, I think, a few months into hospice. And so that's what lit a fire under my butt to basically become obsessive about this work, going from more of a surface level athlete understanding of health to, a really detail-oriented, obsessive approach to holistic health. And then eventually the circadian biology stuff, which, the rest is history from there.
Yeah. And was your dad coaching you as well with the soccer? Or?
He was actually my physical education teacher growing up because I went to a private school. So I did get a lot of good lessons from him on that end. But no, I mainly just went to other teams and other coaches.
Yeah, well, when you first started, you got dad there. But then after, especially on the elite level, you're dealing with top-notch coaches. That's an awesome experience. And sorry to hear about your dad. And it's unfortunate we hear those stories too much, man. That's what we're here, trying to, change it up, helping people, explore themselves. We give them the information and then go down that rabbit hole yourself, right? That's pretty much what we try to say. And it's not that we're trying to redirect people forcefully. And that's what you're going to share here with us. Nothing is by force, right? So most people, they think when you hear circadian alignment, people think it's like sleep. Oh, they're going to talk about sleep. But you're saying it's the entire operating system of the body. So let me ask you this. Are most people trying to fix their health without fixing the system that runs it by doing, the sleep therapy stuff?
Yeah, exactly. I think, what we find in society today is that people have this reductionist mindset to health. They really don't think about the difference between holism and reductionism, where reductionism is more so a focus on one aspect of a system while also neglecting the interconnections involved, the complexity. I mean, systems thinking 101 is something that's very important to me. So, there's a lot of gadgets and hacks and supplements that people focus on, but in reality, we have to look at the first principles of evolutionary and circadian biology, which are quite expansive. They orient themselves around light timing, sleep timing, meal timing, how you get your full spectrum sunlight, what context the individual is in terms of lifestyle, what their health background is. So again, we're looking to apply that lens of holism to somebody's health because otherwise you only treat symptoms instead of the root causes. And ultimately, that's what mainstream medicine is largely geared around, and that's focusing more on symptoms as opposed to fixing the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And we have, we already have that mainstream medicine, the conventional medicine that focuses on reductionism, like you said. And then now we have a lot of the holistic approach, especially in functional medicine. They're falling into the same trap of reductionism with the supplementation, with all the biohacks. I'm like, hold on a minute, guys. We're starting to do the reductionist system that is actually a big problem for people. People, they don't have an information problem. I think we have so much information out there. They have an input problem. One of the biggest broken inputs that you see in modern life, these inputs that they're applying.
There's a lot. I think artificial light at night has been is probably the number one in my opinion because it's actually been shown to cause cancer in human beings. And it makes sense from the perspective of the circadian system because that is ultimately what controls all anti-cancer defenses in your body. And so, artificial light suppresses melatonin directly, which is also anti-cancer, causes ferroptosis, which is an iron-dependent form of cell death. That's terrible news. You have the late meals after nightfall, which cause disruption in the gut clocks. That leads to a dramatically increased rate of all chronic disease because of the chaos it causes within metabolism and all these other subsystems. You have, again, throughout lifestyle, you have like glyphosate, you have all these different stressors that are just terrible for the human body. But my work is more centered around the circadian stuff, which points to artificial light at night, isolated UV, tanning beds, I think are a terrible idea because of that isolated UV. Not watching sunrise, not getting enough sunlight. So sunlight deficiency is a big component to this. And basically just looking at how society has moved from a more agricultural perspective to one where most people spend upwards of 95% of their time indoors. They go from the house to the car to the workplace and then, repeat the process.
And like we said, usually night light, which is the LED light, the blue light you're talking about, it's really disrupting more because you get home and you're there at night and all these lights are on. And sometimes I'm like, why are these so many lights on right now? And it's like, it's getting darker, but you can still deal with that sunset light, make it more natural at home, open your windows and stuff. But people were just getting overwhelmed with all the lighting. And it's such a powerful lever in human biology. You say UV, UVA. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we're getting UV from I hear some experts talk about tanning beds are great because, you're providing the UV, but you mentioned something. You said UV, but there's that UVA, right?
Yeah, so UV is broken down into three distinct categories from the sun. You have UVA, UVB, and UVC. UVC, typically from what I've seen, does not make it through the atmosphere. But funny enough, your own body produces UVC in the form of biophotons. So that's the light you quite literally produce from within due to metabolism and cellular processes. UVA is UV in general, both UVA and UVB are able to stimulate something known as the POMC system, pro-opiomelanocortin system in your brain and also systemically. And that is responsible for creating your most powerful peptide hormones. Now, these peptide hormones consist of melanocyte stimulating hormone, which makes melanin anti-inflammatory. Beta endorphin is an opioid peptide. CART is another opioid peptide with analgesic effects. A lot of these peptide hormones are anti-inflammatories, but also appetite suppressants. That ties into the whole GLP discussion as well. And in general, if you look at UVA and UVB, they have distinct benefits as well. So UVA is able to stimulate nitric oxide in your system, which opens the blood vessels and allows for more blood flow into the system. Great for cardiovascular health. UVA and blue light together have been shown to demolish the bacteria responsible for acne. UVA is also important for, the production of your most basic neurotransmitters and hormones. UVB is interesting because on that side, it's the only light wavelength range responsible for vitamin D3 production. So that calls into question the use of things like SPF 50, which funny enough blocks 98 to 99% of UVB. And so, I like to view this from a holistic standpoint, but it just doesn't make sense when you compare the mainstream narrative to the circadian science narrative. I think there are a lot of contradictions involved there.
And we pretty much could figure out why those contradictions exist, right, with the system, the profit system we have. Now, I want to bring up something that I actually do, and I've done some reels on it. I get a bunch of crap from people, but I've said before, I don't wear sunglasses during the day, especially when I'm at the beach, I'm walking or whatever. I do not wear sunglasses. I used to long ago, but once I found out, all this great information, I stopped wearing them. And so, it's really helped me understand this, what the sunlight is doing. Of course, it's like I always say, listen, I'm not out there baking like an egg or anything. It's going to be in rhythm because people are like, I go out there 15 minutes. My eyes are killing me. I can't even hold my eyes open with the sun. So that's one thing you come up with, and I hear you say it a lot. What's pretty much the dosage? Everyone's different, right? If you're going to just start working out, obviously your biceps are going to kill you if you're doing bicep curls. You're not going to be able to move your arms the next day. So it makes sense. The muscles in the eyes, right, or and everything else in there, the mitochondria is not developed well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so look, with UV exposure, UVA and UVB are short wavelengths of light they pack a punch, okay? They're more powerful than longer wavelengths of light like red and infrared. So we need to understand that there's a lot of nuance involved with UV exposure. You have to do it appropriately within a circadian aligned framework. But when we're talking about sunglasses, what we need to understand is that the eyes are the gateway to the circadian system. So the eyes, brain, and skin are one neuroectoderm unit, meaning that when you are an embryo in your mother's womb, those three things are quite literally made of the same skin tissue. And so they are a circadian trio, which means that we fundamentally want to get light into our eyes peripherally to start the process of circadian alignment, because that light, again, peripherally, I'm not telling people to look at the sun,
right,
but peripherally, that gets into the eyes, it gets into the retinohypothalamic tract, which then goes to the SCN, which is the master circadian clock. That master circadian clock then relays that signal and information to the rest of the peripheral clocks, which are found throughout your body. Every cell has a peripheral clock, every organ, that's just so fundamental. And so from that perspective, when you put sunglasses on chronically, you are blocking that peripheral signal of full spectrum sunlight, especially UV, and you're quite literally setting yourself up for light sensitivity, because at the end of the day, your eyes contain these things known as intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which contain an opsin that's peak sensitivity to blue, known as melanopsin. And the interesting thing about these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells and melanopsin is that they're responsible for photoadaptation, meaning they are quite literally designed in circadian alignment to receive bright light from outdoors, to be able to allow your eyes to adapt to different light levels in the environment. And so what happens if you're chronically wearing sunglasses? You're not giving that signal.
You're tricking the body in its entirety. No signal at all.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so I have commonly seen people, especially blue-eyed, blonde-haired people, remove light sensitivity from the equation with a circadian aligned approach very easily. And it makes sense from the perspective of, muscle building or hypertrophy, because your eyes are a muscle at the end of the day. And if you don't expose them to the stimulus they were designed for, then they're not going to work as they functionally should. And so there's also another discussion with sunglasses, which is what happens when you sunbathe and wear sunglasses? Well, because you're blocking UV light peripherally into the eyes, you're blocking the stimulation of POMC, which we talked about, which produces MSH, which is melanocyte stimulating hormone. And that's what actually produces melanin, which is photoprotective, meaning it dissipates UV light as harmless heat. And essentially you are leaving the door wide open for burns because you're preventing yourself from producing melanin through sunglasses. So again, it's a very complex system. And if we throw in reckless inputs to the system, it's going to create second and third order consequences.
Yeah, so you have people with the sunglasses on, and now you got the sunscreen, everything that, they're ready to go, packed and ready to go. And then also the daytime, they're going out in the middle of the day as well. It's not really, you're not using the sun effectively with the sunsets and the sun, sun rising, sunsets, the right timing that you talk about a lot. I know I hear you in your interviews and stuff. And we're not really protecting ourselves correctly. We're interfering with the system, and we don't fully understand. So that's great that you're bringing this up. Let's bring up blue light. Yeah, there's some great stuff out there. There's gadgets that come out. I specifically wear those blue light blockers, right, at night. And I have the day ones as well. But is that enough? Where are we with this technology?
So I think with technology, the most important thing to understand is that it is primarily emitting isolated blue light. And that's a problem from many different angles that we can get into scientifically. But fundamentally, if we're talking about the nighttime, I think my opinion is that isolated blue is damaging during the day and the night, but especially during the nighttime, because your body is extremely sensitive to shorter wavelength light like blue and green. And so what we want to do really is basically remove the blue and green from the equation. So you can get very creative with that. You can get red vinyl tape from Amazon, all those little lights that you see on the fridge and the oven and the smoke detectors, cover those up completely. With the phone and the computer, I suggest either a website called onetapzap.com. That way you can automatically implement that full red mode into a widget system on either device.
Oh, so you don't need the screen. You know, there's these screens, there's blue light screens, like 50, $75.
No, you can just download software which completely removes the blue and green.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we put that on the comments there.
Yeah, the only difference is that you have to get used to it after about a day or so because the screen turns completely red. But fundamentally, that's really what we need. But I also like to pair this with dark orange blue blockers as well because there are other light sources that you can't control. And so I look at blue blockers as kind of modern day insurance for circadian alignment. Outside of that, for nighttime specifically, we want to make the environment as dark as possible. No overhead lights. You want low lux or low light intense, either incandescence. I mean, I have one right here, or firelight. That's honestly the best type of light for nighttime. And you just want to make sure to maximize that darkness as much as possible because that is what allows your pineal gland to produce circulatory melatonin. And that's very important. Outside of that, even covering the skin with a basic layer of clothing is very important because your skin senses light and uses it for circadian entrainment. And so I think that the fundamental with devices is to lower the brightness to their lowest setting, use blue blockers, use the software to make sure that you go full red mode on any devices. You can get something like the daylight computer as well, which is, blue light free. It's basically an iPad that is circadian friendly. And I think that should pretty much cover it for the nighttime portion.
Crazy. And you mentioned clothing to cover the skin. See, we usually wear these, we'll block the light with these, what do you call these night covers right here, right? But then your skin's exposed and you're receiving the light through the skin, right? We don't think of that. So covering linen, cotton, something like that, that will actually keep your frequencies up too. Great idea there. And then what about, we have a lot of people that drive at night. And we have these crazy lights in the cars now. They're LED, right? I mean, what's that? Are we driving now with the blue light blockers too for that as well? Because it's just, people literally stop driving at night because they can't take that light that's really hitting their eyes.
Yeah, so I think modern LED headlights are probably the worst lights in our environment. And we all intuitively know this because, you try to drive at night these days with the BMWs and the Mercedes headlights, like they will quite literally blind you in the moment. So I think the best thing to do is to try to avoid driving at night if possible. If you can't, I strongly recommend that you play around with dark orange lensed blue blockers for driving. Now, here's the thing. Do it in an empty parking lot at night to just get a test for how well you can actually do that because some people seem to be more sensitive. Some people I've heard are able to fall asleep at the wheel, which is not what we want. And so it's kind of a risk to reward ratio benefit as to whether you can do that. But I'm able to drive with, dark orange blue blockers, no problem. Just takes a few drives to get used to. Don't wear the red ones. Red lens blue blockers, you won't be able to see anything whatsoever. And then I think a second best option is to maybe use the yellow lens ones to at least reduce the blue that's getting into your eyes.
Yeah, it's crazy. I have a friend that was a night driver for a long time. And now he does have an issue with his right eye. I'm not an ophthalmologist. I can't tell you exactly, but he's going to need surgery. Some kind of a hole. He says, they literally say I have a hole in my retina. And it says that they were asking me about the lighting with my computer all the time. Well, I was a night driver. Oh, that could be an issue with the LED light. So yeah, it is affecting our eyes and, deteriorating. And then we come up with the, and speaking of that, ophthalmology or optometry, the cataracts, and they blame the sun. What do you say? What do you have to say about that with cataracts?
It doesn't make sense to me. I wrote an article on this relatively recently, pointing to the fact that every aspect of the eye is circadian in nature. So, lens opacity and lens integrity and all of these other metrics are fundamentally controlled by circadian mechanisms. And so if you look at the eye, there are three main things to focus on that are circadian in nature. You have mitochondria in the eye, which are fundamental to the function of the eye. If you destroy the mitochondria there, your eyes are not going to work as well as they should. And that's one. You have melanin in the eye, which is a circadian biological polymer. It is not a sign of skin or DNA damage like the dermatologists are telling you. There's a whole different world to melanin production and melanin itself. And then you also have opsins, or light sensing proteins within the eye. You have melanopsin, you have rhodopsin, I believe, and these are different light sensing proteins that are attuned to different wavelengths of light in the environment. So from that standpoint, I go to things like chronic circadian disruption and artificial light exposure, and let's say a lack of solar adaptation, which leads to things like cataracts. Because again, like this is a system that is extraordinarily complex, and you can't just say that full spectrum sunlight, the very thing we evolved under for hundreds of millions of years as other biological systems first, but then more so millions of years for human beings, is somehow inherently damaging to that system. It doesn't make any sense. And there are a lot of these little contradictions that we can look into, that point to something deeper that is beyond the mainstream optometry or ophthalmology kind of narrative.
Something I love about you is, and I appreciate your work, is that you go into sharing the data on, especially on the Instagram. You have the data there, the research there. You're not just speaking it out; you're actually proving it. But you don't fall into that reductionism either, you know, because it's so easy to say, yeah, it's this one thing that's causing cataracts. Well, it's never one thing. It's so complex. We're complex creatures. How can you just point it to one thing? It doesn't even make sense. So, you know, that's why I appreciate that work that you do. Where do you see, you know, modern health education going with this isolating cause of all these diseases? Are we going to get better? Do you see any light on the other side of the tunnel?
I mean, yeah, it's a big question. I think there's some areas where we're moving in the right direction, due to, you know, the new administration and whatnot with RFK Jr. There are some areas where I disagree on that as well, but I don't know. It's tough. It's something that's going to require, I think, it's not going to require a top-down approach. It has to be grassroots. It has to be bottom up, and that's the only way I see things really changing, because fundamentally people are in control of their health. They're in control of their education. So they need to take responsibility for the education first, or more so the curiosity first, which leads to the education, which leads to the behavior change. So for me, I don't have any faith in any large institution for any of this stuff.
I agree with you. I don't have faith on the Maha movement, anything like. There's always something behind that. You know, they'll release something, but it's like, you know, I'm going to tell you about the recently the psychedelics, right? Well, we're not really ready for that. We haven't thought about. Hold on, folks. Back in the day, people were taking it. It was helping, and the people that do now, the shamans, they know what they're doing. You have to be, in my opinion, you have to be metabolically healthy to start, you know, inputting that into your system. Because if you're not, then you're going to cause some kind of problems. You're imbalanced. You don't have you're deficient in some kind of nutrients, and receiving that plant medicine is not going to be as effective when you're diseased already. You know, 93% of us are metabolically dysfunctional. I think we need to fix that first. But of course, to the system, it makes perfect sense. That's what I'm thinking. Like, you know, RFK, I'm not giving him any hell, but it's a good thing. You know, Rogan came up with it, and the president agreed. But there's something up there. I think pharma said, "Yeah, go ahead. We have him sick. Let's introduce this, and then it's gonna create more problems where they're gonna need the system, right?
Exactly.
In other words, more medication is gonna happen. So this is why it's a concern to me. And like you said, bottoms up is the only way. I think, you know, giving out this information to people and start from the home. Yeah, from the home we start, but we build communities. All of a sudden, we're a big community, and we're a big collaboration, and we are starting to get used to the grassroots, bottoms up, instead of listening to, unfortunately, our governments that are not here for our health. And that's what we need to focus on more. And I'm just happy that there's a lot of us now collaborating in this, so it helps out a lot. Now, let me bring up something you've referenced before. Now, we're told that the sun exposure contributes to things like the cataracts, of course, I told you, but the skin also. You mentioned layers in the skin. So I'm putting sunscreen on. We now know, most people still don't believe it, but we now know that poison is going straight. It's like, if it's not just consuming things through the mouth, we're actually consuming things through the skin. So give us a little bit of reference on when that sunscreen hits that skin. What layers is it going through, and what's it destroying?
So, first principles, I think we need to mention that the skin is number one, a circadian organ that is clock controlled. Your skin has circadian clocks in every cell that fundamentally control three things: repair, regeneration, and function. And so, leading into that, you have different layers of the skin. You have the epidermis at the highest layer that kind of interfaces with the external environment. You have the dermis, and then you have the hypodermis at the very bottom. Every layer is circadian in nature. Every layer contains mitochondria, contains opsins, those light sensing proteins. And then if you look at every skin cell type, I mean, these are all circadian controlled skin cell types. So
Yeah.
keratinocytes, melanocytes, fibroblasts, Langerhans cells, you name it. And now when we're coming to the discussion of sunscreen, we need to understand that there's really two different categories. You have chemical-based sunscreen, which is terrible. And then you have mineral-based, which is I think it's less terrible. I think there are other issues that present themselves with mineral based, but with chemical based, you have, these ingredients that are number one, photo unstable. They become highly chaotic and unstable when they interact with UV light and heat in general. And then you also have ingredients that can easily become photocarcinogens when that compound interacts with light and heat.
Like
So
you're microwaving yourself, pretty much.
yeah, I mean, in a sense, you have people who are not adapted, who are circadian disrupted, who go out in a UV index of a 10 and then apply this sunscreen that's photocarcinogenic on their skin. Now, I'm not going to say that that causes cancer because it, in my opinion, just increases risk. I don't think the literature has shown that it causes cancer in the way that a lot of influencers say. Outside of that, you have the problem with the fact that sunscreen blocks UVA and UVB. That's what it's designed to do. And that is not only preventing you from getting the benefits of UVA and UVB, it's fundamentally creating a weaker and more dysfunctional skin barrier because you're not developing the adaptation of melanin in your skin, which is photoprotective. So that's a second one. And then you also have the concern of the fact that sunscreen manipulates the spectrum, not in the exact same way, but in a similar way to low emission glass. You just have this blocking of certain wavelengths, you have this increase, relatively speaking, in others, and that can be problematic in my mind. Now, outside of that, I mean, yes, chemical-based sunscreen ingredients do get into the skin. They get into systemic circulation. They've been proven to, have xenoestrogenic properties and hormone disrupting capacity, and that's not something we want to expose ourselves to. Yeah, but I think those are the three main issues with sunscreen, and it's just, again, it's a reductionist attempt. It's myopic, and it's a reductionist attempt to throw into a complex system, which doesn't consider the interconnectedness and the complexity. And that is what creates these second and third order consequences. And then last thing here is that SPF is very interesting because SPF 15, SPF in general is designed to block UVB, which is the only wavelength responsible for vitamin D3 production.
Yeah.
But SPF 15, the lowest level, blocks at least 90% of UVB. The dermatologists are recommending SPF 50, which blocks 98 to 99% of UVB. And so you're not even producing anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, you name it, hormone vitamin D3, which is essential for human health.
It's so crazy. But they'll give you the synthetics, the synthetic vitamin D, that's for sure. So yeah, if someone wanted to fix 80% of their circadian health, right? Their circadian alignment, what are the few rules they would actually need to follow to, even if they go, I'll turn it around, even if they just do 20%, it's going to help. What could they start with?
Sure. So number one, I think waking up at daybreak is very important. That's basically the beginning of biological day. And that'll shift depending on latitude and season. I strongly suggest that people download the free version of an app called the My Circadian app. It's on Android and Apple.
Okay.
And that will tell them the times of things like daybreak, sunrise, midday, UVA, UVB, nightfall. And so the best thing you could do by far for circadian alignment is to get up at daybreak, head outside for a few minutes, come back in, do your duties, and then try to watch sunrise, which is typically an hour or maybe half an hour after daybreak or so. And watching the sunrise is by far like the most important thing because that's the first domino you push to create this systemic circadian alignment. So I usually recommend at least 20 to 25 minutes of watching sunrise. Get as much of your skin as you can exposed. No sunglasses. If you have contacts, remove them from your eyes. No prescription lenses. You want to make sure that that light, which is rich in red and infrared, is interfacing with your body as much as possible, because obviously you're not going to burn, and there's no risk associated with that. There's only upside. And outside of that, I think microdosing UV is very beneficial, but again, that gets into some nuance depending on skin type and whatnot. And then the third thing is by far to make the nighttime dark. Go dark mode. And so after nightfall specifically, you want to make sure there's no blue and green in your environment, as much darkness as you can. And then that's what's going to allow you to go to bed early, and that's where, systemic regeneration and repair happens, especially from a DNA repair standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, so as you could tell just by what you said there, it's not just a nighttime problem; it's a daytime input problem. So, letting us know, we're missing that. A lot of us, including myself, I don't do sunrises. I do sunsets very well, but I need to implement that into my life, And of course, people will complain. Well, I can't get up so early for the sunrise. Well, then we got to adjust our timing. That means
that is also a symptom of circadian disruption, by the way.
There you go. So we have night sleeping that starts probably 11 midnight. That's already too late. So that we have to adapt. We have. I mean, there's no shortcuts. There's no magic pill. We have to make adjustments, and that's just the bottom line. There's no cheating or cutting corners here with circadian alignment, and that's great that you covered that part, because at night, I think it's easier at night. Really, go dark, right? And I think people could adapt to that easier. Of course, there's a lot of people with the phone right next to you going to bed. Oh, I don't fall asleep until I'm on TikTok, and I mean that's horrific. That's got to change, and that's a habit that has to be broken. So why do calories fall in changing the subject now? Why do calories fail when timing is off?
Because the body doesn't really think about food in terms of calories. That's more so a man-made construct.
Good, you said that.
Think about body comp and all these other things. The body is very incredible in that sense, because meal timing makes all the difference, meaning a calorie consumed at 10 a.m. does not have the same impact as a calorie consumed at 10 p.m. So from that standpoint, not all calories are created equal. And this falls into various things. I mean, insulin production is under circadian control. I firmly believe you should only eat during the day, avoid food pretty strictly after nightfall. This also depends on somebody's metabolic context and what they can quote unquote get away with. But, if it's a cup of blueberries or something, I don't have a problem with that. But these large meals and most of the food available after nightfall is directly contributing to metabolic disease. I can take somebody who's metabolically healthy, and simply by changing their meal timing chronically, I can turn them into a type 2 diabetic. I can turn them into somebody who is metabolically compromised. So yeah, I mean, you have insulin production, you have glucose control, glucose homeostasis, you have pancreatic beta cells, which are under circadian control. And just as a quick example of this, your body is essentially not designed to eat at night, because the pancreas is supposed to shut off insulin production after nightfall through a circadian aligned framework. And so even on pancreatic beta cells, which are supposed to produce insulin, there are two types of melatonin receptors on those pancreatic beta cells, MT1 and MT2. MT1 is more so responsible for shutting off insulin production. MT2 is more so responsible for setting, circadian alignment within various tissues. But what's another interesting fact? Insulin and melatonin have an inverse relationship. When you eat food, you suppress melatonin. And so that's a problem with nighttime eating, because essentially you're throwing food into a system that is not designed to produce insulin at night. And in fact, your pancreas will compensate by producing double or triple the amount of insulin by the mere fact that all of these things are under circadian control. So I think that's such a huge component that most people are just not thinking about.
It's making a big impact on diabetes for sure. I mean, think about it, like pancreas. I didn't know that. That's amazing. I mean, your pancreas we already have issues with just what we're eating with insulin resistance, right? So that's a big issue. Now most people, I mean, it depends where, but from what I hear, most people eat their biggest meals at night, right? And then they're not even thinking about it, but they know, because their body's telling them, hey, you know what? I eat at night, I can't sleep well.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you doing about it? Well, I know I got to change. They already know. You don't have to break down the science for them. Their body's really waving the red flags. Something's up here. Notice how when you eat before sunset, and I like in Ayurveda, which is what I studied, it's simple. They make it simple. So they say, just follow the sun. Your sun, let's pretend your gut is the sun, and the fire in the belly is best in the middle. When it's in the middle at top, that's when you eat the biggest meal, which is usually, it could be 11, 12 o'clock at night. 11, 12 o'clock in the daytime, depends where you're at, depends on the season, but that's your biggest meal. The sun sets, and that's where your fire's lowest, your digestive fire's lowest. And so it doesn't make sense to pack your biggest meal at night. So just the sun alone following it, it tells you when your biggest meal should be, right in the middle. Not early morning, not late night, right in the middle. And when you do follow the sun, it happens. And it's got to do with the circadian alignment. It's crazy.
In fact, I think I'll push back a little bit on, I mean, you can interchange between what your biggest meal is, like in terms of timing. I've looked at research showing that actually your biggest meal in the morning is a good idea, so long as you get light exposure first, because again, your body is anticipating. The circadian system is all about anticipation for things like insulin production and glucose homeostasis and triglyceride production and all this other stuff. So it just depends on whatever works for most people. But people will say that, oh, well, it works for me to eat after nightfall. That's more so a manifestation of chronic circadian disruption rather than how evolutionary hunter-gatherers actually consumed food. Because even if you study the Hadza or other tribes that are still in existence today, they've done studies on this. They find that most of their calories are consumed during the daytime, and they rarely, if ever, eat at night. So even from that standpoint, it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's great. So people, they stay up late, they travel, that's going to impact everything. It's going to throw off their hormones. So we're looking at things like, you know what? We're adding so much. It's okay. You're already there. I'm saying, not just to myself, but to other people, let's stop for a minute and let's remove things. And this circadian alignment thing, the circadian rhythm that you practice and teach, this is actually helping us remove things, right? I mean, it's not even costly if you look at it.
No. I mean, I could have somebody follow a circadian aligned framework with maybe under $100, if that. And that's mainly for like things like light bulbs and whatnot. But it's very cheap because ultimately sunrise is free, grounding to the conductive Earth surface is free, sunbathing is free, nighttime darkness is free. So people just.
And that's what I love. That's what you see in these long living cultures, that I've traveled to, and they're not spending a lot of money. There, people here, functional medicine. I'm not talking bad about it. I'm just saying it's going to cost people $2,500 to $5,000.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, it's just, and there's supplementations you're not even absorbing. So it's like you're just peeing it out or, pooping it out. It's expensive poop, if you ask me. You're not going to be absorbing it until your body's ready for it. And the framework that you talk about, for me, that's the alignment that I talk about all the time. It's alignment before anatomy. Let's stop doing all this crazy work with biohacks first. Let's hold off on that. Let's work on the groundwork first, right? And this is where this fits in. Let's work on that first, and then everything comes in layers as well, right? In layers, and you're gonna master longevity better. So that's awesome to know. We'll make sure that we have people connect with you. But before we do that, I want to wrap it up with intentional rapid rounds that I love to put here. No thinking, just first instinct for you, okay? So I'm going to ask you, morning sunlight or cold plunge for you?
Morning sunlight.
That's a given for sure.
Although
right?
cold is very important, by the way.
Yeah. Biggest myth in health right now for you?
That UV light from the sun inherently causes cancer and photoaging.
Exactly. Now, one habit people should stop immediately.
Eating their biggest meal at night under artificial light.
Okay. I thought you were going to say stop wearing the sunglasses, but both are beneficial. What are people Okay, now what are people overcomplicating the most?
What are people overcomplicating them? Probably just being healthy in general. I think a lot of it's just super simple.
Right, it is because like I'll bring back the long living cultures. They don't complicate things; they keep it simple. You
Exactly.
know,
There's no biohacking. It's just, it is
right?
what it is. There are first principles, you know?
Yep. So, what does alignment health actually feel like to you?
It feels like unlimited energy throughout the day. It feels like great sleep, waking up like you're jumping out of bed. It feels like, no brain fog, pure mental clarity throughout the day. It just feels great to be alive when you're actually healthy and in alignment, because that is how the body works. And guess what? The body, the physical, translates into the mental, emotional, and then spiritual. So it's all comprehensive and holistic there.
It's awesome, yeah. And I mean, you hit it right on the number there. I believe that the environment is really affecting human beings right now, and because there's over 90% of us metabolically dysfunctional, we don't feel that. We haven't felt that. I mean, I fall into the trap right now because it's okay for the public to know. I got the hip surgery. I had to get it. It was too painful to continue, and that was my option. That's the choice I made, and I knew it was going to nuke my gut. So I'm going to be working on things like, especially this. This is part of my groundwork. The circadian rhythms are going to come in very nicely, and other things that I do for my health, and most of it is free and cheap. So I'll be sharing that a lot with people in the coming months. As like I said, if you were to test me right now, I'm metabolically dysfunctional, right? I could destroy with the anesthesia, the antibiotics,
It is what it is.
you name it. My body's fighting right now, like, hey, what'd you do? It's a big trauma in my life that I'm coming through. That's why my voice is even more scratchier than usual. Stuck a tube down my throat here for oxygen. So it was bad. So I'm happy to be over that, and I'm going to be fixing that for myself. Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to take you back on a time machine, and you stumble upon your 15-year-old self. It's already thinking, trying to, very curious, trying to figure out how life works. You have 5 minutes with him. What's one piece of advice you would give him? The 15-year-old Zaid.
For the most part, I really wouldn't change anything. I would say being 15, being really focused on soccer and trying to go professional. I mean, even for such a young mind at that age, I think that it's very important to understand that it's okay if it doesn't work out, because ultimately playing soccer professionally did not work out for me. And so that led me down the path of this circadian work. And that's brought a lot of abundance into my life and also other people's lives, because, I mean, there's a lot of people that have been helped through this work.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, whatever you fail at, whatever doesn't come to fruition, there's ultimately 1,000 other paths that lead to what you're searching for, and that feel good factor in life.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, powerful. I mean, this conversation keeps going back to something simple, but it's uncomfortable, of course. For people to hear this, it is uncomfortable. We don't lack information, like we said, we lack that alignment, and maybe health isn't something you just chase, and we're used to chasing stuff with the pill, the Ozempic stuff, and maybe it's something you stop interfering with, which is the sun. Big factor, right? So Zaid, let me ask you, where could people find you and go deeper into your work?
So Instagram, X, and then Substack at Zaid Dahhaj, ZaidKDahhaj. The Substack more specifically is it's really fun deep dive on a lot of subjects, but the publication is called the Circadian Classroom. If they want like a more eclectic style conversation where me and my co-host just talk about a bunch of stuff, including the circadian stuff, the 2 a.m. podcast on all platforms, and then also the course is very important for me. So the 80/20 course is basically a one-stop shop resource for everything circadian. So I've applied the philosophical, the scientific, the practical, and also the historical component to that, to be able to teach people, especially beginners in this work, to not be confused, to have empowerment.
Yeah, it could get very confusing. So that course could go a long way for people. I mean, you're just focused on your expertise there, and there's no going back and forth. So, well, this guy said this. This guy said, no. You're focused on the introductory, and I'll make sure we put that on the comments. Make sure people get the links to all your website, your Instagram, Substack, and all that great stuff. So for the listeners, if this episode helped you, share it with someone who needs to hear this, And remember, aging, it isn't the problem. I mean, it's aging without the intention that's the problem. As you hear, this is a very important topic, and I'm hoping to bring Zaid back for more of this to share and expand our minds, right? Help us wake up. So thank you so much, Zaid, for your time, for being here, and you're taking me on when I was heavily medicated just a couple days ago. But I'm fine now. I'll work on my voice for the next episode.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, thank you so much, and see you again.